Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle. I'm here from Missouri today. If you were to hold up a map and close your eyes and kind of approximate the center of it, of the United States, that's pretty much where we are. And talking about all these cardiomyopathies and everything, I'm having a lot of palpitations. I might end up with tachycardia-induced cardiomyopathy. But if you're wondering why I'm here and how I ended up as one of today's speakers, the quick version of it is this. I was on a vascular surgery rotation when I was in medical school, and my attending, Dr. Jonathan Bath, had heard of the NIH's Rare Diseases Are Not Rare competition. Submissions take the form of any artistic medium that brings to light, as we've talked about, the 300 to 400 million people worldwide that have a rare disease. If you didn't know someone before, which probably all of you do, but if you didn't know someone before, I'm Danielle. I have Ehlers-Danlos. It's an interesting condition. It's a connective tissue disorder that affects my strength, my endurance, my ability to heal, and even possibly my ability to have children. I sometimes refer to it as a reverse superpower because I'm not strong and I can't heal very fast. But the flexibility made for a neat party trick. You know, can anybody do weird things? I was a decent ballerina because of the flexibility too. But this Ehlers-Danlos is kind of what motivated me to submit to the NIH's campaign. So my idea for the submission was to write a poem that included the names of as many rare diseases as I could fit into the poem, or an homage to those rare diseases, illustrate cartoon versions of kids with those diseases, have those illustrations printed on fabric, and then sew that fabric into a quilt. So I know that's a lot of information, but you'll see the quilt in a minute. Today, I'm incredibly excited to be able to present the quilt to Lucas, who you just saw, who is watching online. Everyone, can you please just give a warm welcome to Lucas and his mom online? So to read the poem, and you'll see it as well, but the poem goes, "You may be tall or you may be little. Your hair may be white or even quite curly. Your skin may have freckles or even change colors. We all have our own paths, and yours makes you a star. Embrace your imperfections, join hands with others who are unique, be a torch to illuminate the darkness, and bring magic to a world where it's rare. At the end of the day, all it takes to bloom is a little flexibility, a big heart, an open mind, a lot of happiness, and bunches of love." It's hard to realize when I read it out loud, but there are references to 16 different rare diseases in the poem, each of which, like I said, is illustrated on the quilt. And just like I mentioned in the poem, the focus of my talk today is about kindness as one of the things that unites us as the community of people studying rare diseases. One of the canvases in the back as well, I don't know if some of you noticed that the canvas says, "If you can be anything, be kind." And so basically that kind of sums up my whole talk today, but I'm still going to share a few thoughts anyway. If you're a kid with a rare disease here or watching somewhere, I get it. Like Lucas, I get it. Part of me wishes we're all sitting on my screened-in porch in the fall with some hot chocolate, talking about our struggles and our triumphs, our doubts and our dreams. And I want what I say today to be the same thing that I would say to you if we were just sitting there in a fireside chat. My rare disease went undiagnosed as a kid. I mentioned it to a doctor at one point, but he didn't know what it was. I wondered why I wasn't like the other kids, and as long as I can remember, I had this nagging doubt that it was going to affect my ability to become a surgeon or pursue my dreams. I was worried that I was physically or mentally not strong enough for the job. And although my path has looked a little bit different than my peers because of my diagnosis, I truly believe that everything that I'm most proud of in my life has come from struggle in the face of adversity. My life is proof that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character. Character produces hope, and hope is a call to action, like we've talked about today. I'm not going to change the world, but I hope my attitude and my kindness can be a beacon of light in someone else's time of hardship. I won't probably have a disease ever named after me, but I will work to be the best surgeon scientist that I can be. My rare disease makes it so that I can't do everything, but I can choose to do the next right thing, and I can choose kindness, especially when it's difficult and when it's hard. No matter what your medical history is, you have the choice to be kind too, to go the extra mile for people, to put yourself in their shoes and imagine their struggles like we've talked about today. You have no idea how much that could change someone's world, and it might change yours too. If you're an adult with rare diseases here or watching somewhere, I get that too. We mentioned earlier that 50% of people with rare diseases are children. Well, that kind of leaves the other 50% of us, right? So we're adults with rare diseases, still sometimes, as in my case, not having a genetic test that specifically proves it because we aged out of our what our institution offered. Specifically, my institution didn't offer testing to people below 18. When Dr. Taylor mentioned genetic testing in all medical students earlier, I might have actually been able to benefit from that because I haven't had one yet. You know, I'm still an adult at this point in limbo, not specifically truly knowing the answers, too busy to get all the tests, not available during doctor's hours because I am a doctor, funny enough. I've just had to make adjustments mentally and physically to not be considered weaker than my counterparts, and I think a lot of you can relate. If so, hear me out. We spend countless hours making these adjustments, being exhausted by things that are normal for other people, worrying that we can't fulfill our dreams, wondering if we should modify our dreams, feeding our families, running errands, paying bills, all those aspects of life, that sometimes the last thing on our mind is kindness. I'm the first to admit that I fail and that I have to humble myself regularly and apologize to people for it. I know that we're all exhausted and burned out at times, but I truly believe that the greatest lasting gift that we can give to people is kindness. Or maybe organ donation, because I want to be a transplant surgeon, but that's beside the point. I challenge you and I challenge myself to bold kindness. It's free, but it's one of the hardest, most rewarding things that any of us can accomplish. How wrong I was thinking that being a surgeon was my designated way to help people. It turns out there are a lot more people I can help along the way before, during, and after I get to that ultimate goal. And the same is true for you. Parents, grandparents, caretakers of those people with rare diseases, you are heroes. We've said it today, and you deserve all the praise. My parents didn't have a medical background. They didn't know what Ehlers-Danlos was. They kept taking me to the doctor, sometimes even more than 20 times a year, because they knew something was wrong. They weren't sure what that thing was, but hoped that someone else would be able to figure it out. They always believed me, and they always chose kindness. And I guarantee kindness is probably one of the hardest decisions a parent can make sometimes. But now as an adult looking back, I remember that my parents chose that and the rare disease of kindness in the face of hopelessness and sometimes exhaustion. Your kindness, your care, and your sacrifice do not go unnoticed, and we appreciate you guys. Rocket employees, healthcare workers, researchers, those contributing to the community of rare diseases, I'm with you because I'm one of you. Most of you chose healthcare because you wanted to make a difference. But then, like me, you find yourself doing a lot of administrative work, or you get to the end of the year and wonder if you've really made a difference. Your piece of the puzzle is vital, even if you never see the finished picture. So keep struggling, give your job 100%, do it all with the kindness that you would want demonstrated to you. My personal motivation is this: whatever you do, do it with all of your heart and do it for the glory of God. Do the administrative tasks with a good attitude. Teach, mentor, advocate, research, grind, and know that your efforts are contributing to the bigger picture in a way that you can't even imagine yet. Something else that I have as a unique insight that maybe not everyone has is both the doctor and the patient. I'm being trained to be a surgeon right now, and I'm trying to decide between cardiothoracic surgery and hepatobiliary surgery. So I have a minimum of 7 years left to be able to do what I want to do. Probably a lot more than that. My experience as a patient really informs the way that I practice as a doctor. And similarly, my experience as a doctor informs the type of patient that I want to be as well. Most doctors I know at this point are haunted by some degree of what's called compassion fatigue. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's kind of the cool new way to say burnout. It's a cocktail of exhaustion, self-doubt, trauma, fear, spending a bunch of time on administrative tasks at the expense of patient care. Clinics are overbooked with sometimes 7 people booked for one 15-minute time slot to address very complex concerns in infinitely more complex patients. Those same doctors are also taking care of hospital patients, operating, researching, reading the newest literature, perfecting their skills, all those things. All of which is in the context of also having family, friends, hobbies, and all those other things. When Dr. Dannon mentioned coming out of the hospital with a white coat covered in blood, the only difference now is we don't wear the white coat anymore because we know what's going to happen to it. I say this to provide the context to the experience that all of us have had, a doctor being grossly late to an appointment or rushing through the appointment. It's not an excuse, and in fact, it's a challenge to all doctors, including myself, to be better, to be more thorough yet efficient, to be more thoughtful, understanding, and to be willing to say, I don't know, but I'll find the right person and get back to you. Families and patients, you might wonder how to improve your relationship with your doctor in this context of compassion fatigue. Or how do you start a relationship with a new doctor when your disease is rare, complex, possibly even largely unknown? How can they begin to understand the years of struggle that you've faced and your lifetime experiences? First of all, it requires kindness and grace from all parties. The mechanics of the doctor-patient relationship in our current environment really set it up for failure. I wish that wasn't true, but it is, and that's a whole separate talk. But the challenge is to both doctors and patients to aggressively push back against allowing that relationship to fail at all points with the use of grace and kindness. Second, it requires preparation from all parties. The binder is a great example, but the doctors also need to have preparation when it comes to researching their patients' questions and concerns. And the patients come with particular questions and concerns that you have as well. If everything can't be addressed at that visit, schedule another one and another one until your questions are answered. The doctor will make mistakes too, that's important, even when they're trying their hardest and doing their best. And the best medicine available has a different treatment response, has different side effects, timing, price, all these things in different patients. So patience itself is incredibly important. To add another level of complexity, many rare diseases have no targeted therapy, like mine, for example. That's why companies like Rocket are so important to address this gap in care. We're here today celebrating a future where something like Danon disease can be eradicated. I hope my circumstance of being a doctor with a rare disease affords me the opportunity to help improve the doctor-patient relationship in both directions. Maybe Ehlers-Danlos is my reverse superpower, but is just a little bit of a superpower as well. Not all of us have a rare disease, but we're now intertwined as part of a community working toward a common goal, and that's incredibly special and powerful. About an hour ago, Dr. Adler said, "No one can do something alone, but together we can do something beautiful." We each have our own purpose, our mission, our skill set, but the ride will be a lot more fun if we're kind to each other along the way. You and I may have never met, but after today, I can confidently say that we're all rare, but never, ever alone. Thank you.
We have a special surprise. Little Lucas, whose video you saw before, is actually listening live. It's 9 o'clock in the UK. He's in year 4, and him and his mom are online right now. I'm WhatsApping them. And, you know, I wanted to let you know, Dr. Kinsey, what actually Emma had said. She said that Lucas has always said that he may not be the fastest or the strongest, but because of his PKD, but he will always be the kindest. And so your story and your speech has resonated so much to our family in the UK. So thank you so much. And actually, Danielle, you know, she had mentioned that she quilts. And it's actually a beautiful quilt that she has made. She's gifting it to Lucas in the UK. So we will send it to Lucas. But we wanted to, because they're listening live, we wanted to show what the quilt looked like. So hi, Lucas. Hi, Emma.
And now please welcome Dr. Mousumi Bose.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here and having me here today. I'm just so excited to be part of, you know, such an amazing event, and I want to thank Rocket and Latika and Arpita for inviting me to speak today. This is the clicky thing. Okay. So I should disclose that I'm pretty new to Danon disease, but I've learned a lot here today. And I think what I've sort of learned over the course of this afternoon is that there are a lot of commonalities across rare diseases and the experiences that patients and caregivers face. And that's sort of, what I want to do today is share a little bit about what I've learned over the last couple years as the parent of a child with a rare disease, as a community researcher, that's what I call myself, a community researcher in rare disease, and an advocate for not just patients who are diagnosed with a rare disease, but also for caregivers and families as well, because they need advocacy as well, and that's what's sort of inspired the title of my talk here today. So what I will first do is share a little bit about my personal experience with rare disease, and that really was the foundation of how I started getting into researching rare disease. And then I'll finish off with just talking a little bit about a resource guidebook that I've had the great pleasure to be a part of, and some of the what I feel like are some of the big highlights of that guidebook. So I'll start with my personal experience with rare disease. And that started with the birth of my first son, and that's this little guy here. This is Alon. He was diagnosed with a rare metabolic disease, but more importantly, Alon was a really cool kid. He was amazing. This is a child who could communicate so much through just his eyes and his limited movements that, like, when I think back on my time with Alon, like, I can actually hear his voice, even though I never actually heard it, because he was placed, he had a tracheostomy placed very early on in his life. In the time that we had with him, we tried to do everything that we can to just show him, how much we loved him, and we were able to do a lot of things. We danced a lot. Me and my son, we really like to dance. We're not very good dancers, but we did what we could. We went for walks in his stroller. We took this epic trip to go visit his grandparents. Life, with Alon, the time that we had with him, I just feel so fortunate to have had that time with him, and I just loved every little thing about him. However, Alon had a very severe form of a disease called Zellweger spectrum disorder, and being the caregiver to this beautiful child who had this horrible disease, it was really just that. It was very, very challenging, and sometimes downright awful. I was plagued with just very, very intense feelings of grief, not just at the end of Alon's life, but throughout, since the moment we got his diagnosis. I had all this fear and anger and stress, and these feelings really impacted the way that I was able to provide care for Alon. And some of what I would call my worst caregiving moments, these are moments where I'm screwing up on medications, where I'm breaking equipment, or I'm not able to suction Alon's trach in a way that actually allows him to breathe properly. All of these things can be at least partially attributed to the fact that I could barely see straight from this grief and pain that I was experiencing. And so when he passed away, I was really struggling with trying to find ways to cope and sort of heal from this really intense experience that I had being the caregiver to a child with this rare, devastating disease. Everybody's healing journey in something like this, it varies. For me, I am a researcher by training. So my sort of way of healing involved me just getting back into work. I have a background in nutrition, but once I started to resume my research after my experience with Alon, I had different things that I wanted to study. And one of the things that I really wanted to study is, reflecting back on my experience being the caregiver to a child with a rare disease, that sort of intensity of emotions. I was curious as to whether other caregivers felt this way. Did they have these really what felt like insane emotions, and did that experience affect the way that they provided care? So one of the first studies I did after I started getting back into research is ask other caregivers of patients with Zellweger spectrum disorder, the disease that Alon had. What was your experience? What is your experience being the caregiver of a child to a child with a rare disease like this? And this is a little word cloud of some of the themes that came up in our conversation. And I think, Dawn, Barbara, other caregivers in the room could probably identify with some of these themes. And I really appreciated you mentioning the word roller coaster, because that was a very common sort of theme in our conversations. And these intense emotions, they often had a detrimental impact on the caregiver's well-being, and that often impacted their ability to care for their child. And I think the sort of big takeaway from this study was that, we as caregivers, a lot of the time, we're not okay. And if we're not okay, then the people that we're providing care for are probably not okay either. So when coordinating care for a child with a rare disease, part of that care, what I contend is that part of that care includes care for the caregiver, because these are the people that are really allowing these kids to thrive and survive. So that was one sort of research interest I had after my experience as a rare disease caregiver. Another thing that about my personal experience that really had a huge impact on how I conducted research from that point on was me coming to the realization that as the caregiver to a child with a rare disease, I had a lot of really important information and insights on Ilan and his health status that most people did not have access to. Our doctors would come to me and ask me things like, how are his seizures doing? How is he tolerating his feeds? We didn't have a binder, but apparently we had a very messy folder of information about Ilan. And I've put these pictures up here. And the truth of the matter is, only I'm going to be able to sort of pick out. There are things about Ilan that are being shown here that only I would recognize, or maybe his father would recognize, that tell us something about his health status. So, for example, here at the bottom, there's a very pregnant me holding Ilan while he's feeding, and you may be able to see that he's got his tiny little hand up. And what he's actually telling me is, "You're feeding me too fast, Mom. Please slow down, because I'm very uncomfortable." So, these are the insights that I had that could be used to coordinate care for Ilan. And what I was thinking was that, okay, so I'm not the expert on the disease, but I am the expert on Ilan. And if we could collectively get information from other parents and other caregivers that have similar diseases, or other groups of parents that of rare disease, and sort of gather all this information together, that could probably be very important in informing things like natural history, as well as just further research in these types of rare diseases. And so what I did was I took this sort of insight of the important role of the caregiver in informing about the patient. And this is particularly important when you are dealing with kids who have, because of their disorder, if they have cognitive delays or any sort of communication difficulties, it's that much more important that the caregiver serve this important role in providing information about the state of health for their child. So I just took this sort of idea and kind of ran with it. And the majority of the research that I do is really dependent on caregiver input. So one of the things that I'm really interested in, like I said, I have a background in nutrition, and I was really interested in seeing if there was any research on looking at dietary or nutritional interventions for different rare metabolic diseases. And when I did a little bit of digging, turned out that there's not a lot of information out there about dietary interventions. And not only that, there's really very, very little standards of care in terms of how to do these types of dietary assessments in individuals, children in particular, with these rare metabolic diseases, especially if they have these communication difficulties. One of the reasons that this is when you're doing these dietary assessments, you have to rely on the feedback of the patient to give you information on what did they eat over the last 24 hours or over the last several days. So my sort of thoughts were, well, we have these parents that are really just experts in their child's day-to-day care. Maybe if we ask the parents, okay, what did your child eat over the last 24 hours or over the last few days? Can we collect information on dietary and nutrient intake in a way that's consistent and stable and feasible that can be applied in research studies? So we did a little pilot study, and I don't want to bore you with data here, but when we found that when we asked parents using multiple different types of data collection, what did your child eat over the last couple of days or the last 24 hours, the results were pretty consistent and similar across different types of data collection. And then when we went a little bit further and did serial data collection, where over a period of time we asked parents 3 or 4 times, what did your child eat today? The nutrient intake we found was fairly stable over that period of time. So when we're asking the question, can we use parent-caregiver feedback to inform us about what an individual who has a rare disease nutrient intake is, the answer is yes, we can. And if we can do this, then this is just a first step in trying to conduct more studies looking at the role of nutrition in improving the quality of life for individuals affected by rare diseases. So that's just a little snapshot of what I do. Some other things that I've been doing over the last couple of years, again, using that sort of caregiver input, is looking at how do we develop the best measurement outcomes for rare diseases if we're going to be trying to move towards clinical trials, and also looking at not just measurement outcomes, but just overall clinical trial design, and using the caregiver input and asking them, what's meaningful to you? What's meaningful to your family? What do you want to see changed in your child with a rare disease? So again, that's just a little bit of some other research that I do, and if I'm happy to talk about this in more detail, and you'll probably be sorry that you asked me, because I'll talk to you for a really long time about it. So the last thing I want to talk about today is, like I said, this guidebook, this resource that I've had the privilege to be a part of, called the Circle of Care Guidebook for Caregivers of Rare and Serious Illnesses. And this was a joint collaboration by the National Alliance for Caregiving and Global Genes, which is another umbrella rare disease advocacy association. And again, sort of really leaning on this idea of the importance of caregiver feedback in helping move forward information about rare diseases. And that's what we did here. But when I was doing research for this guidebook, I had focus groups with caregivers of a bunch of different rare diseases, and I asked them, yeah, we're all told, yeah, there's no manual or no handbook for what we have to go through, but if there was, what would you like to see in it? Those are the questions that we asked them, and I feel like I didn't actually even write this book. I feel like the feedback that we got from our caregivers kind of wrote itself, and that's really what informed all of these chapters that we included in this guidebook for caregivers of rare and serious illnesses. So I'm not going to go through the whole book, but I'll talk about some of the things that, that I want to highlight here. So we all know that as rare disease families, diagnosis and care coordination is a really, really important part. So the first couple of chapters talk about what are some resources if you are having trouble getting an accurate diagnosis. We have another chapter that talks about coordinating medical care. We know that rare diseases can oftentimes be quite complex, and it may require care coordination across a number of different medical professionals. So we have charts in there offering some guidance on who might be an appropriate person to have on your child's care team. And it's beyond just the geneticist. It's beyond, the disease specialist or the medical specialist on a specific organ system. We try to really focus on the care for the whole family, and we include a social worker, a clinical psychologist, really trying to develop a comprehensive care team to best take care of the family. We also in the medical care chapter, we also address things like rare disease centers of excellence, which I know were mentioned earlier this afternoon. We all know the economic burden of rare disease is immense, and so we have a chapter that offers information on financial assistance, whether it be through government or non-governmental resources, other foundations, how to apply for Medicaid waiver programs, any state programs that may have some funding for maternal and child health. So these are some of what I feel like are important aspects to managing the care for a child with a rare disease. But we also have other chapters, and these are kind of my favorite chapters, where we really try to focus on quality of life for a family affected by rare disease. So we have a chapter on education where we talk about how to navigate through the IEP process or getting a 504. And then we have another chapter where we talk about how to go on vacation when you're a family affected by a rare disease. We mention theme parks that have disability access passes. And we talk about summer camps for individuals with disabilities. We talk about how to go about applying for a Make-A-Wish, and also enrolling children in Special Olympics and other sort of community engaged activities. And the last part of this guidebook is, we all know as rare disease parents, we don't have the time to go through a book that's cover to cover. And we want a guidebook like this, so when we have something that we need to address, we can say, okay, where is the website? Where is the resource? And what we have at the back of this guidebook is this appendix where it takes all of the resources, the websites that have been peppered throughout the chapters of the book, and organize them so that a caregiver can just simply go to the back and say, okay, I need to find this particular resource. So that's all I'll say about the guidebook. I had a little QR code for the guidebook, but I know that in the follow-up emails through Rocket, they will provide the link for it. But if you look up caregiving.org, they have the link to this guidebook. So it's openly accessible, and anybody can read it. So the last things that I will say to sort of hammer in the points that I wanted to make is that the caregiver to an individual with a rare disease plays a very, very important role, not in just providing care for the individual with a rare disease, as well as informing medical care providers or researchers with information about their child that could be useful in moving forward therapeutic efforts, but also in caring for other family members. And because of this important role that we play as caregivers, it's really important to incorporate care for the caregiver into the care plan for an individual with a rare disease. So that's really my big point that I want to take home. And speaking of communities and families, all of the research that I did, I was able to do because of my team at MSU, some of the networks I've developed with other patient advocacy foundation and their industry partners, the National Alliance for Caregiving. I've also recently started a relationship with a medical school and I'm really excited to be engaging the next generation of medical care providers in some of the research that I've been involved in. and as well as my family and friends, and some of them who are here today. And I will just end my story with saying that, my husband and I were very blessed to have two healthy boys after Alon passed away. And they know about their older brother, and my hope for them is that they will grow up to be advocates for the rare disease community as well. So I want to thank you for your time, and yeah.